The phone vibrated on my desk like it had something to prove. Not a ringtone, just that low, impatient buzz that cuts through printer noise and burnt coffee. I glanced at the screen and felt my shoulders lock. My wife's name sat there bright and ordinary, as if nothing in the world had changed. I answered without standing, without warning myself. Her voice came through already smiling. Not warm, victorious. "I just inherited millions," she said. Then without pausing for breath, "Pack your things. Get out of the apartment now." The line stayed open. She wanted to hear me fall. I didn't. I was sitting in a shared office on the 5th floor, the kind with gray carpet worn thin by decades of sensible shoes. The copier coughed behind me. Someone laughed down the hall. Life continued at a reasonable pace, which made her words feel unreal, like a radio playing the wrong station. I kept my voice level the way you do when you're asking for directions or confirming an appointment. "Who told you I asked?" She laughed sharp and quick, the sound she used when she thought she was already ahead. "My uncle's attorney. Everything's official." "Which attorney?" I said. "And which court?" A pause, just a half second. Then her tone lifted louder, prouder. "You don't need details. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Now start packing." I looked at the clock on the wall above my monitor. 2:41 p.m. The second hand moved with a steadiness I trusted. Details I learned a long time ago are what's left when someone tries to shove you into panic. "What time did you say?" I asked. She exhaled through her nose, annoyed. "Don't play games. Just get out." Then the line went dead. I stayed where I was. I didn't announce anything. I didn't ask to leave early. I sent 2 emails I'd already planned to send, closed my laptop, and stood up. In the elevator, my reflection stared back at me, hair neat, shoulders square, a calm that might have looked like indifference to anyone who didn't know better. I wasn't calm, I was focused. The drive home felt shorter than usual, as if the city had decided not to test me. I didn't imagine reconciliation or explanation. I went for confirmation. When I turned onto our street, my phone buzzed again, texts stacking up from her number. "Don't come back later. Take what you need and go." "This is happening." I didn't reply. I parked. The building lobby smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The front desk clerk avoided my eyes, which told me more than he probably intended. I nodded anyway and headed for the elevator. The ride up was quiet. No music, no interruptions. Just the hum of cables and my own breathing. Our apartment door was unlocked. That detail landed harder than the call. Inside, the lights were on, as if it were evening, every lamp casting a deliberate glow. On the dining table sat a neat folder, papers aligned with care that bordered on performance. A pen rested on top, angled toward a single line, the way a host points out where to sign a guest book. She stood by the window with her phone in hand, her back straight, her posture practiced. "You're quick," she said without turning. "Sign and go. You can pick up the rest later." I didn't answer right away. I set my keys down and stepped closer to the table. The top page read like certainty, divorce packet, immediate move-out notice, a list of assets typed in a hurry. It was heavy on language and light on authority. No court seal, no notarization, no case number, theater in black ink. "Who drafted this?" I asked. "My lawyer," she said too fast. I took out my phone and photographed the pages, every margin, every header, the envelope with its embossed letterhead. She reached for my phone as if to snatch it away. I lifted my eyes. "No," I said. Her hand froze in the air. Her courage, I'd learned, never lasted as long as her pride. She stepped back, irritated. "Are you signing or not?" she demanded. I sat down. The chair scraped softly against the floor. I picked up the pen and signed where she pointed, the same way I'd signed hospital forms, leases, tax returns. Signing didn't scare me. Trusting someone who needed to humiliate me, to feel tall, that scared me. I closed the folder and stood. "Enjoy your luck," I said with the smallest smile. "Just don't confuse it with ownership." She scoffed. "You sound poetic for someone with nothing. Where will you even go?" I didn't give her a stage. I went to the bedroom and pulled out a small suitcase. Documents, medication, charger, 2 changes of clothes. The rest could stay. I wasn't running. I was choosing what deserved to be carried. When I came back into the living room, she was on the phone again, not bothering to lower her voice. "Yes, list it tonight," she said. "Cash buyers, put it as an opportunity. We'll sign tomorrow." "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I stopped at the door and looked once more at the clock on the wall. 3:18 p.m. I stored the number like evidence that hadn't been written yet. In the hallway, my phone vibrated with another message from her. Confirm you're not coming back. I took a screenshot and slipped the phone into my pocket. Outside, the air felt sharper. I didn't go back for dignity where I'd just been pushed out. I drove to a simple hotel off a busy avenue, 24-hour desk cameras at the entrance. Not luxury, protection. At check-in, I asked for a high floor away from the elevator. As I signed the form, my phone buzzed again and again. I let it. In the room, I set the suitcase against the wall and sat on the edge of the bed. The television stayed off. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen and understood something that settled cold and clear. The shock wasn't the inheritance. The shock was the pleasure she'd taken in expelling me. I opened my email and reread the message she'd forwarded earlier line by line. Appointment details, attorney name, location, and then the sentence that held me still, my full name, spelled correctly, listed not as her spouse, but as a required party to be present. I wasn't invited out of courtesy. I was summoned by procedure. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. 4:02 p.m., less than 24 hours, and she still believed she'd won. I picked up my phone and made a call I'd been putting off for years, not to beg, not to complain, but to ask for steps. The voice on the other end didn't offer comfort. It offered process. I listened. I wrote nothing down. I didn't need to. The direction was enough. When the call ended, I lay back and stared at the ceiling, the city humming below. I wasn't counting hours anymore. I was counting moves. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind kept filing things away the way it always had when something mattered. Dates, tones, the order of events. I woke before my alarm and sat on the edge of the hotel bed, shoes on, phone in my hand, watching the minutes tick forward. 6:12 a.m. The city outside was already awake. Traffic hissed. A siren passed and faded. Ordinary sounds, steady and dependable. I checked my messages. Overnight, she'd sent a dozen more, some commanding, some mocking, some suddenly conciliatory. You don't have to make this hard. Just sign and move on. This could be easy if you let it. I didn't answer. I took screenshots, making sure the timestamps were visible. Chronology, I'd been told, is armor. Downstairs, I ate toast I didn't taste and drank coffee that was too bitter. An empty stomach makes emotions sloppy. I wasn't interested in being sloppy. Back in the room, I showered, dressed plainly, and put my phone on silent. At 9:05 a.m., I ordered a car. I didn't go alone. The attorney met me outside the probate building 15 minutes early. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She shook my hand once, firm and brief, the way people do when they intend to be useful. You observe, she said. You don't explain. If she provokes you, let the room handle it. Inside, the waiting area felt like a cross-section of private lives reduced to paper. Elderly couples clutched envelopes. A man argued in a whisper with someone on his phone. A woman tapped a pen against her knee, counting something I couldn't see. The air smelled faintly of toner and old carpet. I checked the wall clock. 9:44 a.m. She arrived as if she were late to brunch rather than early to consequence. Perfume first, then confidence. She wore a pressed blouse and a smile she'd practiced in mirrors. At her side was a woman I didn't recognize. Eyes alert, posture, eager, the kind of companion people bring when they want an audience. My wife saw me and stopped short, irritation flashing across her face. You actually came, she said loud enough for others to hear. I told you this was done. My attorney stood before I did. Good morning, she said, polite and unyielding. We're here for the review. My wife pointed at me. He's here to cause trouble. My attorney didn't look at her. She addressed the clerk instead, presented our documents, and asked for confirmation of the appointment. The clerk nodded and motioned us toward a smaller room. My wife followed, heels clicking with impatience. Her companion hovered close, a half step behind, eyes flicking between us. We sat. The representative opened a file and began in a neutral voice that didn't care about anyone's feelings. He explained what this meeting was and what it wasn't. Assets existed. Obligations existed. Nothing transferred instantly. Procedures mattered. My wife shifted in her chair. I'm the heir, she said. We can move faster. We'll proceed as written, the representative replied. The document was read in sections. Property descriptions, estimated values. My wife's lips curved triumphant as the numbers accumulated. Then the room changed temperature, not with drama, but with weight. The representative read a clause slowly, carefully, as if each word had been placed with intention. No beneficiary may use the estate to evict, abandon, or humiliate a spouse from the shared home without lawful process and appropriate support. My wife laughed sharp and disbelieving. That's ridiculous. It's what's written, the representative said without emphasis. My attorney made a note. I watched my wife's companion stiffen, the smile slipping. The reading continued. During the initial phase of administration, an additional party was named to observe, document, and ensure compliance. The representative looked up and said my name in full. It sounded different out loud, official anchored. My wife's mouth opened, then closed. That's wrong, she said. He has no standing. He was designated, the representative replied. This is not advisory. She pushed back from the table. You can't be serious. We are, the representative said and went on. I didn't look at her. I looked at the clock on the wall. 10:11 a.m. I fixed the moment where it belonged. The meeting ended without ceremony. Paperwork was assigned. Next steps outlined. Outside sunlight hit the sidewalk with the indifference of a normal day. My wife stormed ahead, her companion scrambling to keep up. My phone buzzed before I reached the curb. Unknown number. I answered. Sir, a man said, voice tight. I'm the listing agent. There's a problem. Your wife took a deposit last night. The buyer is here demanding a contract today. He says he's been misled. I stopped walking. My attorney touched my arm lightly. I put the call on speaker. She told me everything was clear, the agent continued. Cash buyer, he's threatening to go to the police. My attorney took over, calm and precise. You'll pause all activity immediately. There is no authority to sell at this stage. You'll send us the listing, the communications, and proof of funds. Do not accept further money. This is an irregular transaction. The agent's tone shifted, fear replacing bluster. I'll send everything. The call ended. My wife's phone rang at the same time. She glanced at me, eyes blazing, and then answered, pacing. Her voice rose and fell, anger curdling into panic. I didn't listen. I watched the clock in the window of a nearby shop. 10:23 a.m. My phone buzzed again, a text from her. You did this, then another. Fix it, now. I replied once, stop contacting me. Direct all communication to counsel. Her response came fast. You think you're clever. You'll regret this. I screenshot it. We walked back toward the car. My attorney spoke without drama. We'll freeze the listing. We'll document the deposit. If she tries to pressure the buyer, that becomes another problem for her. And the papers at the apartment, I asked. Performance, she said. No seal, no filing. A scare tactic. Useful only as evidence of intent. The car door closed behind us. Traffic flowed. A bus sighed at the curb. Somewhere a lunch crowd gathered. My phone vibrated again this time, a message that pretended to be official, urging me to report immediately for questioning. No badge number. No address. Urgency without authority. My attorney glanced at it and shook her head. Bait. I looked out the window and watched the city pass. Yesterday, she'd told me to get out like it was a prize she'd won. Today, she was scrambling to hold something she didn't yet own. Back at the hotel, I set my phone on the desk and lined up the screenshots in order. Call, lockout, fake papers, deposit, fake notice. The shape of it was clear now, not chaos, pattern. At 11:07 a.m., she called again. I let it ring. At 11:09, a voicemail arrived, her voice cracked and furious. You're ruining everything, she said. You always do. I saved it. I didn't feel triumph. I felt alignment, the quiet satisfaction of watching a lie meet a process it couldn't bend. Tomorrow she'd learn the difference between luck and ownership. For now, it was enough to keep time on my side. By early afternoon, the hotel room felt smaller, like a waiting room for decisions that hadn't been announced yet. I spread the papers across the desk anyway. Printouts the agent had sent, copies of the fake notices, screenshots with timestamps lined up like fence posts. I wasn't building a case to impress anyone. I was building something I could follow without emotion. The city outside kept moving, indifferent to my organization. Cars passed. Someone laughed on the sidewalk. A delivery truck idled and pulled away. At 1:18 p.m., an email landed that I hadn't been expecting, forwarded again from my wife's account, as if she still believed proximity equaled control. The subject line was dry and official. The body was shorter than I'd imagined. It confirmed tomorrow's schedule, and the location repeated the attorney's name, and then ended with a line that made the room go quiet in a way sound never could. Presence of the following party is required. My full name followed. No modifiers, no relationship labels. Just me typed cleanly as if I were a function rather than a person. I read it twice then, a third time slower. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I felt the shift, the kind you feel when a door clicks into place behind you, not locking you in, but sealing a room you no longer need to re-enter. I checked the time. 1:22 p.m. I saved the email and forwarded it to my attorney with a single line received. Her reply came back in under a minute. Good. Do not respond to her today. The phone buzzed again. My wife's number. I didn't answer. The voicemail came seconds later, breathless and sharp. I know what you're trying to do, she said. You're trying to steal this from me. I archived it. Theft implies ownership. She didn't have that yet. I ordered lunch to the room and ate without turning on the television. Food was fuel, nothing else. At 2:04 p.m., the agent sent the listing details photos already pulled from the site, the word opportunity stamped across the description like a dare. A receipt showed a deposit amount wired the night before. My attorney replied with a formal notice copied to the brokerage, instructing all activity to cease. The language was unadorned, procedural, and absolute. I watched the replies come in, each more cautious than the last. At 2:31 p.m., another message from an unknown number appeared. You need to come in immediately. This is serious. No name. No signature. The urgency was the tell. I took a screenshot and set it aside. When people rush you without credentials, they want you to trip. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan as it traced slow circles. Yesterday, she told me to get out as if it were a favor she was granting herself. Today, she was juggling stories, trying to keep them from colliding. I wasn't angry. Anger makes noise. I was interested. At 3:07 p.m., the hotel phone rang. The front desk informed me a package had arrived. I went down and signed for a thin envelope, my name typed neatly on the label. Inside was a couriered copy of the same email I'd already received, printed on letterhead, the ink slightly raised where a stamp had pressed. The paper smelled faintly of toner and glue. I took it upstairs and slid it into the folder with the others. My wife called again at 3:19. This time I answered. What are you doing? She demanded, skipping greeting entirely. The agent says everything's frozen. That's correct, I said. You can't do this, she said. You're overstepping. I'm following instructions, I replied. Direct your questions to counsel. You think you're smarter than me, she snapped. You always needed someone else to fight your battles. I let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. This isn't a fight, I said. It's a process. She hung up. I checked the clock. 3:24 p.m. I wrote it down on a sticky note and placed it next to the envelope. Not because I needed the reminder, but because I wanted the shape of the day visible. Patterns are easier to see when you stop pretending events are isolated. Late afternoon brought a knock at the door. Hotel security responding to a complaint from someone claiming to know me. I showed my ID, explained I was waiting for counsel, and the guard nodded, satisfied. Another attempt poorly executed. I sent a note to my attorney. She's escalating. Her response was brief, expected. Keep recording. At 4:02 p.m., my phone vibrated with a message from a number I recognized but hadn't seen in years, a mutual friend cautious by nature. She's saying you're trying to block her inheritance. I replied with one sentence. I'm complying with the will. No more. No less. The sun shifted, laying longer shadows across the carpet. I packed the papers back into the folder and set it by the door. The room felt ready, like a place you leave knowing you won't be back for long. I checked out early and moved to another hotel across town, one with better lighting in the lobby and fewer corners. Safety wasn't fear, it was preparation. At 6:11 p.m., my wife sent a final message for the day. This ends tomorrow. I didn't answer. I looked at the clock instead and imagined tomorrow at 10, how rooms sound when people realize rules apply to them too. That night I slept. Not deeply, but enough. When I woke, it was with the steady certainty that comes from having done everything you can without doing too much. I gathered the folder, and checked the time one last time before leaving the room. 7:58 a.m. She still believed the story she'd told herself. I was about to attend the version that was written down. The morning had a thin metallic chill, the kind that sharpens your attention whether you want it to or not. I stood on the curb across from the probate building and watched people move in and out with folders pressed to their chests, each of them carrying a private weight. I checked my watch. 9:38 a.m. I didn't rush. I didn't rehearse lines. The truth doesn't need warming up. My attorney arrived exactly when she said she would. She wore the same neutral suit as before, hair pulled back, expression clear. No dramatics, no promises. She nodded once. "We go in together," she said. "You don't speak unless I ask you to." I agreed. Obedience to process was the whole point. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and floor cleaner. A clerk called numbers. Pens scratched. The low murmur of other people's problems formed a background hum. We took seats near the wall, close enough to see the clock without craning our necks. 9:46. I fixed the time where it belonged and let my shoulders settle. She arrived at 9:51, late enough to make an entrance early enough to feel in control. She looked composed, almost serene, as if yesterday hadn't ended with phone calls and frozen listings. At her side was the same woman from the day before, eyes darting, smile set a fraction too tight. My wife spotted me and smirked a small tilt of the head that meant watch this. Still playing along, she said loud enough for a few heads to turn. My attorney stood first. "Good morning," she said to the room more than to my wife. The smirk faltered. People who thrive on spectacle don't like neutral witnesses. We were called into a smaller conference room with a rectangular table and chairs that didn't invite comfort. The representative entered, carrying a thick envelope, the edges worn from handling. He didn't smile. He didn't scowl. He sat and began the way he always did, I imagined, by reminding everyone where they were. "This is a procedural review," he said. "It is not a debate." My wife crossed her arms. "I understand. Let's move quickly." He nodded and opened the envelope. The first pages were familiar identification of the estate, confirmation of assets, acknowledgement of outstanding obligations. As figures were read aloud, my wife's posture, loosened confidence creeping back into her shoulders. Numbers have that effect on people who mistake them for power. Then the tone shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Conditions, restrictions, language that didn't bend. No beneficiary, the representative read, may use the estate or its anticipated proceeds to force an unlawful eviction, to deprive a spouse of shelter without due process, or to humiliate a spouse by abrupt displacement from the shared home. My wife laughed, a short bark that echoed wrong in the room. "That can't be enforceable." "It is enforceable," the representative replied, not unkindly. "It is written." My attorney made a note. I watched my wife's companion's straightened eyes narrowing, as if trying to read the room for exits. The representative continued, his voice steady, listing obligations to tenants, requirements for notice, prohibitions against premature sale or listing. Each sentence landed with quiet finality. And he said, turning a page, "During the initial administrative period, an additional party has been designated to observe and document compliance." He said my name. The sound of it, full, precise, felt like a door closing somewhere behind me. My wife leaned forward. "That's a mistake," she said. "He has no role here." The representative looked up. "The designation is explicit." "You're saying he gets to interfere?" She pressed, volume rising. "No," the representative said. "He gets to observe." My attorney spoke, then measured. "Observation is sufficient." My wife pushed her chair back. "This is absurd. You're letting him sabotage me." "No one here is being sabotaged," the representative replied. "We are following instructions." Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. I looked at the clock on the wall. 10:04 a.m. I fixed the moment the way I'd fixed the others. Time didn't care about her outrage. The meeting concluded with a list of next steps, documentation to be issued, notices to be sent, a reminder that any attempt to sell or encumber property prior to authorization would be recorded. My wife stood before the representative, finished speaking. "This is a joke," she said. "You'll hear from my attorney." "You're welcome to pursue any lawful remedy," he replied. She stormed out, heels sharp against tile. Her companion followed, no longer smiling. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like restraint. Outside, sunlight hit the steps, bright and unapologetic. I inhaled and felt my lungs fill without resistance. My phone rang before we reached the sidewalk. "Unknown number." I answered. "Sir," a man said, breathless. "I'm with the buyer. He's here now. He says your wife promised him clear title today. He's angry. He wants his money back, or he's calling the police." My attorney held out her hand. I put the call on speaker and passed the phone to her. She spoke the way she always did, short and precise. There is no authority to sell. You will advise the buyer to pause and preserve all records. We will be sending written notice. The man's voice dropped. She was very confident. Confidence is not documentation, my attorney said. Send everything. The call ended. I looked at the time reflected in a nearby window. 10:23 a.m., less than half an hour since the reading ended, and consequences were already spreading. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my wife. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed her voice stripped of polish. What did you tell them? She demanded. They're panicking. You're doing this on purpose. I saved the message. I didn't feel the urge to respond. When someone confuses volume with leverage, silence becomes a tool. We walked toward the car. My attorney spoke without turning her head. She moved too fast, she said. People who move too fast make records. And the buyer, I asked. He'll want his money back, she said. That pressure won't point at you. Traffic flowed. A cyclist passed. A woman waited for the light with a grocery bag balanced on her hip. The city continued, uninterested in my wife's sense of entitlement. I checked the time again out of habit. 10:37 a.m. By the time we reached the office, messages had stacked up: agents, acquaintances, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Rumors travel faster than facts, but facts have better footing. My attorney began drafting notices, each sentence careful and cold. I watched her work and understood something with a clarity that surprised me. This wasn't revenge. It was alignment. My life was snapping back into a shape I recognized. At 11:12 a.m., my wife sent one last message, all caps. You think you won. I looked at the clock and typed a reply I never sent. Winning implies a game. This was an inventory. Tomorrow there would be more noise, more attempts. But this morning had already done its work. The room had spoken. The paper had weight. And for the first time since the phone buzzed on my desk, I felt something settle into place. Not relief. Certainty. The call about the deposit didn't end the morning. It opened a door that had been waiting to swing. By the time we reached my attorney's office, the quiet kind with frosted glass and a reception desk that never raised its voice, 3 more messages had arrived from different numbers. Each one carried the same panic in a different accent. The buyer is furious. The agency wants clarification. We need to resolve this today. I set my phone face down on the desk and watched my attorney move through the space like someone who had done this before and expected to do it again. She didn't rush. She didn't sigh. She opened a new folder, labeled it with the date, and began to build the line of the day. First, she said we contain the outside damage. Then we stop her from creating more. She called the brokerage and spoke in sentences that left no room for interpretation. The listing was unauthorized. The deposit had been accepted without authority. Any further communication with my wife regarding the property was to cease immediately. Everything would be documented. Everything would be written. The tone on the other end shifted, as it always does when commission meets consequence. Apologies replaced confidence. The word mistake appeared carefully separated from liability. My attorney didn't correct them. She let them choose their words and recorded the choice. At 11:46 a.m., the buyer himself called. He wanted to speak to me. My attorney looked at me and waited. I nodded. She put the call on speaker and sat beside me close enough that her presence felt like a guardrail. I worked my whole life for that money, the man said, voice tight. She said everything was clear. I gave a deposit. I want the contract. I didn't apologize. Apologies imply responsibility. You weren't misled by me, I said, choosing each word the way you choose steps on ice. You were misled by someone who didn't have the right to sell. I'm taking steps to make sure you don't lose more. Silence followed, heavy and uncertain. Then quieter. She told me you were trying to take this from her. She locked me out of my home yesterday, I replied. Today she tried to sell something she doesn't own yet. Those are facts. Everything else is noise. My attorney added, do not transfer additional funds. Preserve all records. You'll have documentation to pursue recovery. That protects you. The man exhaled. I don't want trouble, he said. Neither do we, my attorney replied. That's why we're slowing this down. When the call ended, I felt something loosen in my chest, not relief, but clarity. The mess she'd made was no longer contained to our marriage. She'd dragged a stranger into it, and strangers bring mirrors. At 12:14 p.m., my wife called. I didn't answer. She texted instead. He's blaming me. They're all blaming me. Fix this. I took a screenshot and slid the phone across the desk to my attorney. She's trying to shift responsibility, she said. That's expected. What happens if she doesn't stop? I asked. We escalate, she said, formally. She drafted a cease and desist that read like a door closing, no further contact with agents or buyers, no representation of authority, no harassment. She copied the brokerage, the agent, and my wife's attorney, whose name had appeared on the earlier paperwork, and now had to stand up to it. The reply from my wife's attorney arrived 20 minutes later, curt and cautious. We are reviewing. That was the sound of distance being created. At 12:52 p.m., another message appeared on my phone, this one, from an unknown number with a familiar urgency. Report immediately for questioning. No seal, no reference, just pressure. My attorney shook her head. Second attempt, she said. She's trying to make you move without me. We documented it and did nothing else. Doing nothing is often the hardest action to take. I went out for a short walk while my attorney made calls. The sun had climbed high enough to flatten shadows. People ate lunch on benches. A dog tugged at its leash, eager and untroubled. I checked the time on my watch. 1:27 p.m. Yesterday at this hour, I'd been told to get out, as if my life were a suitcase she could push into the hall. Today I was standing in the middle of a weekday watching strangers chew sandwiches, and the world felt steady. When I returned, my attorney had printed a receipt. The buyer's deposit, she said. We've confirmed the amount and the date. It will matter. My phone vibrated again, this time a voicemail from my wife. Her voice had changed. Gone was the command. Gone was the mockery. What remained was speed and fear. They're talking about police, she said. I didn't know it would be like this. You need to help me. I saved the message and didn't respond. Help is not the same as rescue. She'd confused the two for years. At 2:08 p.m., a message came from the woman who'd accompanied her to probate. She's spiraling, it read. She asked me for money. She says you set her up. I typed one sentence and deleted it, then another. I settled on this, keep your records. Don't delete anything. I hit send. My attorney raised an eyebrow. Careful, she said. I'm not recruiting, I replied. I'm advising. The afternoon stretched. Calls slowed. The brokerage confirmed the listing had been pulled. The agent apologized again, this time with legal language. My attorney accepted the apology the way one accepts rain, without gratitude, without anger. At 3:11 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from my wife that made my stomach go cold. I know where you are. I showed it to my attorney. She didn't flinch. Good, she said. Now we document intent. She began drafting a request for a no-contact order, not dramatic, not accusatory, just a record of repeated attempts to intimidate. We may not need to file it, she said, but having it ready changes the temperature. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes for a moment. I thought of the apartment door left unlocked, the pen angled toward the signature line, the way she'd said, get out, like it was a reward she'd earned. I opened my eyes and checked the clock. 3:26 p.m. My phone rang, her name, I answered this time. What do you want, she asked, breath ragged. I want you to stop, I said. Direct everything to your attorney. You think you're so calm, she snapped. You think you've won. I didn't raise my voice. This isn't about winning. You tried to sell something you don't own. Someone gave you money. That has consequences. There was a pause, then smaller, they're coming after me. I didn't send them, I said. You did. She started to cry. The sound was raw, unfamiliar. I felt a flicker of something I didn't feed. Please, she said, help me. I am helping, I replied. I'm stopping you from making it worse. I ended the call before guilt could turn into noise. My attorney nodded once, approving. At 4:02 p.m., the buyer's attorney confirmed receipt of our notice. The word refund appeared for the first time. The day began to tilt. I gathered my things as the light softened outside. I didn't feel victorious. I felt precise. Yesterday's humiliation had turned into something more useful than anger. It had become leverage, not because I wielded it, but because she'd created it. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed again. This time there was no threat in the message, just 3 words sent without punctuation. We need to talk. I looked at the time and kept walking. By late afternoon, the noise shifted. It wasn't loud anymore. It was scattered. That's how you know someone is losing control, not when they shout, but when they start pulling at too many threads at once. I watched it happen from a distance, the way you watch a storm break apart after it hits land. At 4:41 p.m., my attorney received confirmation that the brokerage had formally logged the unauthorized listing in the deposit issue. The words internal review appeared in an email that tried to sound neutral. Neutrality, I'd learned, is often fear wearing a tie. My attorney printed it and slid it into the folder without comment. "She's not done," she said. "People like her don't stop when they're cornered. They change games." She was right. The next move came at 5:03 p.m., delivered through a message that was meant to sound official enough to frighten and vague enough to deny. "You are required to appear for clarification regarding a complaint filed against you. No agency name, no reference number, no signature, just urgency." This is the second version, my attorney said, comparing it to the earlier attempt. Same tactic, different costume. I didn't feel panic. I felt something closer to irritation, the kind that comes when someone keeps knocking on a door you've already closed. We documented it and moved on. At 5:22 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it wasn't her. It was the woman who had stood beside her at probate, the one with the tight smile. I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. I answered. "I don't want trouble," she said before I could speak. Her voice trembled, the confidence gone. "She told me things. About you. About why you were there." "I'm sure she did," I said. "She said you were trying to steal the inheritance. That you were dangerous." The word landed awkwardly like it didn't belong in her mouth. "And you called because I asked." "Because she called me an hour ago," she said, breath-catching. "She asked me for money. She said everything was falling apart and that you set her up." I closed my eyes for a moment and pictured the room at probate, the way my wife's posture had stiffened when the paper stopped obeying her. "If you have messages from her," I said, "keep them. Don't delete anything." There was a pause. "I do," she admitted. "Texts, voice notes?" "Then keep them," I repeated. "They protect you." She exhaled shakily. "I don't want to be part of this." "Then don't," I said. "Distance is a choice." She hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt confirmation. People who use others as shields panic when the shields step away. At 6:01 p.m., my attorney began drafting a formal request for a no-contact order. Not an accusation, a record, dates, times, messages, attempts to intimidate. She wrote the way surgeons cut clean, exact no unnecessary movement. "We may never file this," she said, "but having it ready changes how the next call sounds." As if summoned by the sentence, my phone buzzed again. My wife. I answered. Her voice was different now. Not commanding, not mocking. Broken around the edges, rushed as if she were trying to outrun the consequences she'd already tripped over. "They're saying I committed fraud," she said. "They're saying the buyer is talking to a lawyer." "You told them to do this." "No," I said. "I told them the truth." "You're enjoying this," she snapped weakly. "I'm preventing damage," I replied. "There's a difference." Silence, then quieter. "You could fix it. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't," I said. "You took money for something you didn't have the right to sell." "I inherited it," she insisted. "You were told you might," I corrected. "Those aren't the same." Her breathing grew uneven. "You want me ruined?" I looked at the clock on the wall. 6:28 p.m. The light outside the window had softened into early evening. "I want you to stop," I said. "Call your attorney. Follow their advice. Stop contacting me." "You think you're untouchable," she said, anger flaring for one last attempt. "I can say things. I can accuse you." My attorney raised an eyebrow, listening. I kept my voice even. "If you do, it becomes another document," I said. "That's all." She hung up. For a moment, the room felt unusually quiet. Not empty, resolved. My attorney finished the draft and slid it across the desk to me. "Read it," she said. I did. Every word matched the timeline I'd been keeping in my head. Call at work, lockout, fake papers, unauthorized listing, deposit, harassment. Each piece sat where it belonged. There was no drama in it, just sequence. At 7:10 p.m., a new email arrived from her attorney. The tone had changed. Where earlier there had been bravado, now there was distance. "My client will cease direct contact. Please direct all communication through counsel." The line felt like a white flag folded into a briefcase. I leaned back in my chair and let the day settle. This wasn't the end, it was the turn. People who rely on intimidation rarely know what to do when it stops working. They either retreat or escalate badly. At 7:26 p.m., my phone rang one last time, her number. I answered not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted the last sound of the day, to be honest. I didn't think it would go like this, she said. I thought once I had the money, everything would make sense. Money doesn't explain behavior, I replied. It reveals it. I just wanted to start my life, she whispered. You started it yesterday, I said, by pushing me out. There was a long pause. I could hear street noise on her end. Cars, a horn, someone calling her name impatiently. So that's it, she asked. That's it, I said. Please don't call me again. I ended the call before sympathy could confuse the line I'd drawn. When I left the office, the sky had turned a deep blue that promised night without threat. I checked the time out of habit. 7:41 p.m. The numbers no longer felt like weapons. They felt like markers on a road I'd already chosen. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, formal steps, quiet consequences. She would call it cruelty. I would call it order. And order, I was learning, is what remains when noise finally runs out. The next morning didn't announce itself with drama. It arrived quietly, the way mornings do when the shouting has finally exhausted itself. I woke before my alarm, not from anxiety, but from habit, and lay still long enough to notice what wasn't there. No buzzing phone, no stacked messages, no new threats dressed up as urgency. Just the hum of traffic far below and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. I checked the time. 6:58 a.m. For the first time since the call at my desk, the number didn't feel like evidence. It felt like a beginning. I showered, dressed, and packed the folder with the same care I'd used all week. Not because I needed it for a fight, but because the work wasn't finished yet. There are endings that look like celebrations, and there are endings that look like receipts. I was headed for the second kind. My attorney met me mid-morning, already moving through emails on her phone. Her counsel confirmed compliance, she said. No direct contact, no listings. The buyer's refund is in motion. We drove without small talk. At a stoplight, a man crossed the street carrying flowers wrapped in brown paper. A woman laughed into her phone. Someone else waited with groceries balanced on one hip. Ordinary scenes, the kind you miss when your life has been reduced to reaction. At the building, we were escorted to the apartment to retrieve the remainder of my things. The door that had been left unlocked days earlier was now secured. The irony didn't escape me. Locks appear when power feels uncertain. Inside, the place looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. That was fine. I didn't come for memory. I came for closure. I packed what was left, books, a framed photograph. I hadn't realized I'd miss a jacket I wore on cold mornings. The pen that had been placed so deliberately on the table was gone. I smiled at that. Props don't survive long once the audience leaves. My attorney stood by the window, phone in hand. We'll formalize the separation, she said. Proper filing, proper notice. You'll be protected. And her, I asked. She'll be required to follow the same rules she tried to skip. Rules, they're unglamorous. They don't trend, but they last. As we left, a woman in the hallway paused and looked at me, then looked away as if embarrassed to have witnessed something private. I nodded anyway. Dignity doesn't need agreement, it needs practice. Later that afternoon, we stopped by one of the properties tied to the estate, not to inspect or manage, just to confirm a detail. An elderly tenant opened the door, hands unsteady, eyes wary. They said we might have to go, she whispered. That it was an opportunity. I kept my voice low. No one is being thrown out today, I said, and not for greed. Her shoulders sagged with relief. She didn't hug me. She didn't thank me extravagantly. She simply nodded the way people do when fear loosens its grip. When I stepped back outside, I felt something settle that money can't touch. Responsibility handled correctly doesn't inflate you, it steadies you. My phone rang once more that day. It was her attorney, professional and distant. The conversation was brief. Dates were set, boundaries confirmed. When the call ended, I looked at the screen and noticed my hand wasn't shaking. It hadn't been for a while. That evening, alone in a different room, with a different view, I opened the folder one last time and scanned the timeline I'd kept so carefully. Call at work, lockout, paper theater, deposit, threats, consequences. Each event sat in order, complete. I didn't need to add anything else. The phone buzzed with a final message from her number, short, stripped of flourish. Good luck. I read it once and didn't answer right away. Luck is what people wish for when they've mistaken chance for entitlement. I typed 2 words, erased them, typed them again, and sent them without punctuation. Good luck. Then I blocked the number. I checked the time out of habit. 9:12 p.m. There was no countdown anymore. No deadline breathing down my neck. The clock had returned to being what it was meant to be, a measure, not a threat. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the week pass through me without commentary. The humiliation, the precision, the restraint, the quiet decisions that don't look impressive from the outside, but change everything on the inside. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. If you're listening to this and thinking about a moment when someone tried to shrink you with volume or money or urgency, I want you to hear this clearly. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's the space you need to choose the right door when the hallway gets dark. I didn't win because I outshouted anyone. I won because I refused to run. I refused to confuse luck with ownership noise, with authority speed with truth. I let paper do what paper does best. I let time tell the story. If this story stayed with you, I want to know why. What would you have done in my place? Leave a comment below and tell me where you're listening from. I read everyone. We share stories like this every day. Stories about quiet strength and consequences that arrive on schedule. So subscribe if you don't want to miss the next chapter. Let's keep walking this road together, one careful step at a time.